and welcome to Lunchtime Listens. I'm Emily, and I'm going to be doing another story time for adults. Today, I am going to be reading a few picture books. I'm going to tell you about a chapter book that I really enjoy, and it's all going to be on Black History Month. So February is Black History Month, and we are celebrating at the library. So you can come in and check out all of the displays that we have. In youth particularly, we have this really huge display of books, a lot of new books. I'm going to talk about how great some of these new books are that are coming out soon. To start off, I'm going to read one called An American Story, and this is by Kwame Alexander and illustrated by Dare Coulter. And this one came out last year. Not all Black history is slavery, but you can't talk about Black history without talking about slavery, and that's sort of what this book is about. So let's get into it. Illustrations and the artwork in general is just beautiful because it's like multi-mediums in this book, so I will do my best to try and show you the illustrations as well. So we have An American Story. How do you tell a story that starts in Africa and ends in horror? An unbelievable story about evil plans and big guns hiding in the night, waiting. While the girls and the boys finish chores, playing games, listen to old tales of trickster spiders and talking drums, waiting. This is where you can see really cool, done out of clay illustrations, or artwork rather. For the woman to sing everyone to sleep, for the men to dream of tomorrow, waiting. To steal them away from their lives and sell them in America. But you can't sell people. How do you tell a story about slavery? About sly men from cold places scheming and laughing on tall ships, while people shackled below, crammed in small, hot spaces, crying and sometimes die. A story of struggle and sacrifice about bold men and women jumping into the sea, into the jaws of sharks, because they were scared and didn't know where they were being taken or what they'd find when they got there. Maybe they just wanted to escape. How do you tell that story? About copper dreams wrapped in iron chains, about working hard for long hours, from can see to can't, for free. About picking cotton and growing sugar under the burning sun, while blonde-haired boys and girls ate their candy and played tag before school in their woolen breeches and cotton gowns, and no reading allowed, and no reading allowed. About planting corn and threshing rice and curing tobacco and harvesting coffee and cooking and cleaning and building for free. Why weren't they paid? That's not fair. How do you tell a story about strength and pride and refusing to be broken? And refusing to stop smiling and loving. I really like this page. And each night gathering the children by the fire to hear tales of Moses and trickster rabbits and missing home and missing home. That's sad. Really, really sad, Miss Simmons. How do you tell that story and not want to weep for the world. Now you see we're sort of getting a classroom scene. A story about mothers fleeing in the wind, wading in the water, conducting freedom. About fathers fighting back, stealing away, chasing liberty. About some being caught by the shearing lash of night raiders, and others riding the night by the light of the North Star. About little girls waking up in the middle of the night to their tormented mothers pleading, "Please don't take my boy from me." About families torn apart, sold like cattle. I don't think I can continue. It's just too painful. I shouldn't have to read this to you. I'm so sorry, children. But don't you always tell us to speak the truth, Miss Simmons, even when it's hard? When I've done something bad, my dad always says, "You can't change the past, but you can do better in the future." Whenever I'm sad, my grandma sings me her favorite poem. "We've suffered, been battered, our lives have been scattered, but we're still here, and that's all that matters. We're still here." How do you tell an American story? About standing up and speaking out, about Sojourner Truth and Robert Smalls, about the Civil War and emancipation, about yesterday's nightmare and the courage to dream a new tomorrow. How do you tell a story this hard to hear that hurts and still loves? You do it by being brave enough to lift your voice, by holding history in one hand and clenching hope in the other. And that is the end. There's some beautiful author's notes and a note from the illustrator as well to tell you more about his artistic process in making this. Really beautiful book. So there you go. That is An American Story. I will read one more fiction picture book. So this one, it just came out this month, called Do You Know Them? Families Lost and Found After the Civil War. So this is like talking about something that I didn't quite realize about how families tried to be reunited after the Civil War, was a lot of them took out ads in the newspaper. So here is a fictional story. The author says that they made up Letty and the main character in this, but all of the advertisements that you're gonna see are ones that the author actually found in real life. After the war ended, everyone was missing someone. Letty was missing her family. They had been sold and lost long before enslavement was abolished. Were they looking for her too? Every day, Letty saved her pennies. To earn money, she helped Miss Ida sew. She swept the floors at Mr. Young's store. When Uncle Charlie came home from the docks, she helped him make ropes to sell. Then they practiced reading the newspaper. She didn't buy candy or toys. She saved for something better, something that would bring her whole family together. "Have you saved enough yet, Letty?" Miss Ida asked her in the mornings. "Almost," Letty said. "How many pennies have you got now?" Mr. Young asked her in the afternoon. 22, Mr. Young," Letty said as she swept. Every week, Letty read the advertisements in the newspaper with Uncle Charlie. She held on to them, and again, she underlined the words that she wanted to use in her own ad. As she grew older, Letty learned to read on her own, but a lot of people couldn't, so she read to the congregation at church. She read every advertisement and imagined her family listening to the same ads waiting to hear from her and Uncle Charlie. Information wanted. Of my husband, George W. Burton, of Company A, 115th Regiment, United States Army. When last heard from in 1965, he was in the hospital in Brownsville. Any information will be thankfully received by his wife. My wife's brother still works in the coal mines up in Wheeling, Mr. Young said. That's not too far from Brownsville. We'll send a letter and find out. Letty wondered if her brothers worked in the coal mines, or maybe they worked in the docks like Uncle Charlie. Wherever they were, she hoped that they were still together. Folks didn't always have much to go on, whether it was money or information, but Letty was glad everyone did what they could to help one another find their lost family members. She sure was missing hers. With a gentle nod from the pastor, Letty took a deep breath and continued reading. Do you know them? I would like to find my people. My mother's name was Charlotte King, and when I was sold, I had 5 brothers, Alfred, John, Reason, Robert, and Paul King. At the same time, they were sold to Seth Woodruff, a trader. My mother was sold to Mr. Hunter at Campbell Courthouse. I have been living in Hopsville, Kentucky for 11 years. My name was Rose King. Any information would be gladly received by Miss Rose Claudel. Uncle Charlie looked up. Miss Ida did too. Letty wondered if they knew where any of the Kings might be. Just as her heart tightened up with too many feelings, Miss Ida spoke. I knew a young man named Reason. The name stuck out. It sure did, Uncle Charlie said, but he didn't look excited when he said it. Miss Ida and I met him along one of the hidden routes. I believe he was on his way to England. She said he knew someone there who could help him start a new life, Uncle Charlie explained. After his brothers died in an uprising, fighting for their freedom, he wanted to get as far away from this country as he could. Letty felt awful. There was so much she wanted to say, but all the words got stuck inside. We'll send a message, whether it's good news or bad. Every little bit helps, the pastor said. Letty held the newspaper up high and read the next advertisement. This time, her heart filled with happiness. She looked at her uncle with a blaze of hope burning in her eyes. Found his father, Salt Lake City. Many thanks for the notice in Seeking the Lost column. I have found my father. Respectively, S.G. Wilson. There we go. Applause erupted. Hallelujah, everyone shouted. That's good news indeed, the pastor said. Tears were wiped and smiles lingered as joy soared through the room. That wasn't cheap, Uncle Charlie said. Each ad costs at least 50 cents. Letty knew. She kept track of how much each newspaper charged to place an advertisement for lost ones. But she also knew Mr. Wilson didn't spend his money on the notice just to say thank you. This was proof that the advertisements worked. This was why Letty had saved her pennies through all the weeks and months and years. She would find her family. Letty had to clear her throat several times before she could finish reading. When she sat back down, she didn't hear much else of what the pastor said. She held on to her papers like before, but this time she circled Mr. Wilson's ad again and again. The next morning, Letty walked to the office of the Richmond Planet. Her steps were as light as air even as she clutched a heavy treasure close to her chest. She handed a carefully folded piece of paper to Mr. Jones, the man at the desk. Then she opened her purse. For a moment, Letty could hardly breathe. The words on the paper, the copper coins she'd been working so hard for, they felt more valuable than gold. Are you here to buy a paper, Letty? Mr. Jones asked. Letty's smile was as bright as the sun, and her voice sang like the birds. No, sir, I'm here to place an ad for Uncle Charlie and me, she said. Did you hear? A man in Salt Lake City found his father. I did, Mr. Jones said, but his smile faltered. I know what you're thinking, Letty said as she placed 50 pennies on the desk. Mr. Jones could see the determination in Letty's eyes. He didn't dare say one bad thing. "You give us hope, Letty," he said. Mr. Wilson's ad gave Letty hope. She held tight to that hope as she continued to work, save, and read. Her reading had improved, but sharing the ads was never easy. There were so many lost ones. Would she ever find her mother, her father, her brothers and sisters? Would Uncle Charlie ever find his wife and children? It took longer than Letty could have imagined, but one day, as she stood in front of the congregation, an ad jumped out at her. Letty's hands shook. Letty could barely read through the tears that filled her eyes. She could barely speak. "Uncle Charlie," she managed to say. "She knows them." Letty's whispers turned into a shout. "She knows them." "Hallelujah," the pastor cried. "Praise be," echoed the congregation. Uncle Charlie's cried too, as Letty read the ad again and again. "Dear Sir, I saw an advertisement in your paper last week. One Charlie Oliver wants to find some of his relatives. I am well acquainted with all of his people who now live in King William County, Virginia. For further information, call blank." She knows them! Yay. That is the end. Like I said, there's a really nice author's note in the back here about sort of the history of this. It does say it's hard to know exactly how successful these searches were, but it's still a fascinating piece of history, and there's no doubt that at least some families were reunited because of it. So that was Did You Know Them by Shanna Keller and illustrated by Laura Freeman. I want to tell you about a book that just came out a few months ago. It's called Gone Wolf by Amber McBride. And I would say that this would probably be good for a middle schooler, so 6th, 7th, 8th grade or older. It is a very interesting book. It takes place in two parts. One is in the distant future in 2111 is when the first part takes place, and it follows a girl whose name is just Inmate 11, and she lives in a small room with only her dog to keep her company. And her dog is starting to act kind of weird. She calls it Going Wolf. He's like pacing a lot, acting a little like he wants to get out. This is a really messed up world that Inmate 11 lives in. She is kept in this small room because she is meant to be a companion and sort of a genetic match for the president's son. So she's considered what is called a blue in this world, and you just sort of start to get a really sinister feeling about this future that Inmate 11 is stuck in. And she's starting to feel like maybe she wants to go wolf too. And then you get a future portion where it's in 2022. It follows a young girl named Imogene, who's also 12 years old, and she is just sort of struggling with the aftermaths of the pandemic. You know, she had a really hard time, is feeling really isolated, but her therapist helped connect her to a Black college student, a college student that wants to teach her or tell her that it's really important to be telling her story. So this book is really beautiful. It focuses on the importance of storytelling about the past, the future, and the present. So yeah, I think that if you like sort of sci-fi books, you'd really like this one. Amber McBride has written 2 other books for teens, but both of those are in verse, so they're sort of poetry. This is her first time trying a book in prose, but she really does have an amazing way with words. She's very lyrical when it comes to her narrative. So I really, this book really packs a punch. It was very, very good. I can't think of anything else like it. It's very, very good. It's called Gone Wolf by Amber McBride. Let's read one more. I had a hard time picking a book to read, you guys, because like this is a fantastic problem to have. These are all new picture book biographies that have come out within the last like few months. So we have one on Ida B. Wells, we have one on John Lewis, we have one on Roy DeCarva, who is a photographer in Harlem, and we have one on Virginia Hamilton, who was the first Black woman to win the Newbery Award for children's literature. So all 4 of these books all just came out in the last month. So come check them out from the library. There is so much to read coming out, but I wanted to do one that came out a little while ago, but last year, so still very recent. This one is called Rock, Rosetta, Rock, Roll, Rosetta, Roll, and it is about Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who I didn't really know anything about up until a few years ago, but she is considered the godmother of rock and roll, and you're gonna find out why. Rock, Rosetta, rock, roll, Rosetta, roll. A long time ago, there you were, pint-sized sensation in tiny cotton plant, Arkansas. Rosa, Rosabelle, Rosietta, who had a clue you'd one day rock the world? Little girl, big guitar, music in your air, music in your hair, in your bones, wiggling your toes, making downright mighty music, music, music. Tiny digits of your hands, skipping, strumming, strolling, rolling up and down, that big guitar's fingerboard. Rock, Rosetta, rock, roll, Rosetta, roll. Then up jumped the day Mama had a strong, strong calling to quit your tiny town, be a preacher, take your genius with her, let it shine in a bigger place, a wider space. You zopped on your traveling shoes for a choo-choo up to Chicago. There, in that big bustling place on the shore of a great lake, you became a wonder in a 40th Street church, a star. At outdoor revivals, on street corners, wherever Mama preached, you played, 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 moving folks to clap happy, stamp their feet, shout, holler, toss coins too. Jump for joy over your mighty music, music, music. You put so much heart and soul, such power into songs of worship, songs of praise. Little girl, big guitar, smiles so alive, remembered one lady. Little girl, big guitar. 2, you had a mighty amount of singing in your soul. Yes, you did. Little girl, big voice. Belting out the rhythm-bound gospel sound. Songs born in the souls of Black folk about good news, even in grim times. Songs like, up above my head, I hear music in the air. Music in your air, in your hair, in your bones, wiggling your toes, traveling bag, sure stayed packed. All grown, you took gospel music far beyond the walls, the halls of this and that church. You gifted gospel music big time to people all over the place. Mixing it up with beats from gospels, cousin boogie woogie, cousin jazz, cousin swing, cousin the big bad blues. Playing and singing the Lord's songs in a nightclub? Lots of church folks frowned, shook their heads at that. But you believed it was right and righteous to play wherever you pleased, and you did it like nobody else. With those flying fingers of yours, they said you made a guitar talk. On Decadiscs all over the states, across the blue ocean, on radio, TV, you played, and sang as the fabulous, flamboyant Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Rock, Rosetta, rock, roll, Rosetta, roll. That lively smile still dazzling like diamonds, rhinestone earrings shaped like guitars. You were a great entertainer, prone to stopping mid-song, flipping folks a joke, beguiling them with angelic prose, blowing them away with a kicking guitar solo. Bold, audacious, in a word, bodacious, wherever the song. Be it your old favorite, Up above my head, I hear music in the air, or Singing in my soul about peace and joy, or This train about a choo-choo to a place of glory. And ooh, there was your rock me, and ooh, there was your rock me, a strong, strong longing to be cradled in a whole lot of love. With big bands, solo, as half a duet, with quartets, you played, and sang, jammed on that piano too. Meanwhile, lots of young cats, some future legends, had been going wow, wow, wild over you, digging your lips, copping your style. You see here? Maybe that one looks a little familiar. And man, didn't you play all kinds of ways. Up on your toes, down on the floor, behind your back, stepping, striding, stomping, jumping up on stage, and in heels at that. Hip-hugging your guitar, duck-walking too. You even rocked fans in the English rain. Sister Rosetta Tharpe, with all your fiery, fierce, feisty picking and plucking, you blazed a trail for a fast-paced, hard-driving, gritty, gusty sound that made the electric guitar a star, a music called rock and roll. Rock, Rosetta, rock. Roll, Rosetta, roll. And I'm going to read you the author's note of this one since it's so good, but there is a whole timeline here of Sister Rosetta's whole life, and I do want to just read you the quick author's note because it's a really good one. So, when Sister Rosetta Tharpe started doing her thing, it was pretty rare to see a girl or a woman strumming away on a guitar. Clearly, Rosetta wasn't fazed by the thinking that the guitar, like the saxophone and drums, wasn't a man's instrument. "Can't no man play like me," she later declared. "I play better than a man." And Rosetta was not exaggerating. Her picking and plucking on an acoustic or electric guitar were the stuff of legends. This bold soul, who largely lived on her own terms, was anything but conventional and ordinary. She married 3 times and, they say, had romances with more than a few women. At one point, she made buku bucks. At one point, she went broke. For most of her career, Rosetta had to put up with segregation. While she was on the road, she couldn't rest her head or have a meal just anywhere she pleased. Many hotels and restaurants all over the United States refused to have black guests. Through it all, Rosetta played, and sang, becoming a great inspiration to future music legends. These legends included the leg-shaking, hip-swiveling, hip-singing singer-guitar Elvis Presley, often called the King of Rock and Roll. Sister Rosetta Tharpe also had a major influence on the duck-walking singer-songwriter guitarist Chuck Berry and on the flashy singer-songwriter piano player Little Richard. And there was the country, gospel, folks, blues, rockabilly, and rock and roll singer-songwriter guitarist Johnny Cash. When Cash was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1992, he spoke of Rosetta's impact on him in his acceptance speech. It was at the Home of the Blues record shop where I bought my first record of Sister Rosetta Tharpe singing those great gospel songs. Cash said of some of his early songs were influenced by people like Sister Rosetta. The many women Rosetta influenced includes the great gospel and R&B singer Aretha Franklin, hailed the Queen of Soul. After Rosetta died, for years a host of folks didn't know that she had ever existed, didn't know what a phenomenal blow-em-away talent she was. But then, don't you know, the lady had a comeback, became a star again. In 2003, MC Records released the album Shout Sister Shout, a tribute to Sister Rosetta Tharpe. 4 years later came the biography Shout Sister Shout, the untold story of rock and roll trailblazer Sister Rosetta Tharpe by historian Gail F. Wild. And then in 2007, Rosetta was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame, and the recognition just kept coming. So now we have movies and books and documentaries and books like this all about Sister Rosetta Tharpe. It says, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, once a girl with a big guitar, has continued to influence musicians and singers down to this very day. So that is Rock Rosetta Rock, Roll Rosetta Roll by Tanya Bolden. I love this. I think I accidentally on purpose picked all books that sort of talk about the magic of storytelling and how important it is to tell these stories and to hear about all this history and whatnot. So yeah, be sure that you come by the library and check out our Black History displays. Celebrate Black History all year long, not just in February. There are going to be amazing books coming out in the future too, so be sure you stop by and check out. You can put any of these books on hold. Tune in next week for Lunchtime Listens, and Christina will be back reading a chapter book. So with that, I'm Emily, and thank you for listening.